Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to lecture 11. And it's Victor Ukok. And today I'm going to be talking about exception handling. So we are going to see how we handle exceptions, what exceptions are, how they are being handled um, here in JavaScript, using JavaScript. The topics we are going to cover today is we are going to look at JavaScript errors and exceptions. We'll see what an error is, what an exception is. We are going to see types of errors, and then you see how you can try an exception when an error occurs. We are also going to see how to use try and catch to um, try a block of code, and if an error is generated from running that block of code, we catch that error. Then we are also going to see how we are going to use the finally statement. So the finally statement is like saying whether whether there is a an error, an exception thrown or not. Uh, we we finally run that block of code. So a JavaScript code throws an exception when a particular statement generates an error. So when you try to run a particular statement or a particular set of statements, and that statement or one of those statements contains an error, then okay. So I hope you guys can see my screen now.
Yes, go ahead.
All right, let me go on. So a JavaScript code throws an exception when a particular statement generates an error. So when you generate when you try to run a certain statement or a certain set of statements, and one of those statements contains an error, so an exception is generated. So that exception tells you the type of error and the message for that particular error. So then when an error occurs in JavaScript, it creates an error object with two properties. It creates an error object with name and message property. So if you catch an error, you can actually check the name of the error and the message. Or if you print the error and message, then you're going to actually see maybe the name of the error and then the message from that error. We'll see how that works very soon. So let us look at types of error. So we have eval error. So error creates an instance representing an error that occurs regarding a global function. So this eval error now used to exist before ES 2015. So when that's ES6, so when ES6 came out, so eval error was replaced with what's that error name? Is this reference? Yeah, syntax error. It was replaced with syntax error. So instead of eval error, when anytime there's an error that occurs regarding the global function, it's syntax error that would be used instead of eval error. Then we look at range error. So range error creates an instance representing an error that occurs when a numeric value or a numeric variable or parameter is outside of its valid range. So let's see an example of that range error. So we can't have a number. A number cannot have 500 significant digits. So so this is going to result in a range error. So we have range error example, and then we have this as an example. So 500 or a number cannot have 500 significant digits. So now this to precision now you're trying to make this 500 you're passing, you're trying to take how do I put it, make it precise to 500 significant digits, and then you try this, and since a number cannot have 500 significant digits, it will be thrown, an error will be thrown to you. So okay, sorry, we are saying num to precision. So we are saying we are passing num here, and we are saying to precision 500 significant digits. So you can't have a number cannot have like 500 significant digits now. So that is going to result to an error, and then we console.log that error. If we console.log this error, we are going to see an error name, which would be range error, and then we are going to see the error message, which would be maybe your number is out of range or something. So very soon we are going to see how that works. So let's go back to reference error. So the reference error object is generated when an okay, it generates an error when a variable that doesn't exist in the current scope is referenced. So take this as um, you declared a variable, and then you try to call that variable in a block where um, that variable can't be accessed. So when you try to call that or use that variable there, what will be generated is a reference error. So it's trying to tell you that the variable you're referring to does not exist in that particular scope, or maybe in that particular scope. So that will generate this reference error. An example of that reference error is, for example, this y. So this y doesn't exist. If you check, so we said x is equals to 5, and we said x should be equals to y plus 1. But where is y coming from? Don't have y anywhere in this program. So what what we get back is maybe y cannot be used, or why we don't have any reference name y. So it will try an error. This will scream. So we can, now we've seen how we can even use try and catch. So we can catch the error thrown from here, and we can decide how we want to show it to the user. So we can say documents. We can use DOM. So for people that know front end, you would understand this document get element by ID, and then maybe this is maybe a div with an ID of demo. Then you now say inner HTML should be error.name. So error.name will take reference error and then show it to the user that okay, there's a reference error. Then if you did err.message, then it is going to show it's going to inject this error, that is, if this was error.message, it's going to inject that message into this any elements that has this ID. The same thing here, error.name, it will inject that error, like that error name, that name property of the error into this demo. Another thing, you can name this whatever I want to name it. You can name it E. Some people like name it ERR. Some people like spelling it completely like error, ERROR. Any way you want to name it, you can name it. So that's totally up to you. Then we look at syntax error. So syntax error creates an instance of a syntax error. So syntax error occurs when you have mistake in your syntax. Like let's look at this for example. So you tried to evaluate alert, and then you now put hello, but you didn't close it here. So this will produce an error. So the error is that you've missed closing your semiquotes and your single quote, your single quotation mark. You missed closing it here when you opened it here. So you can still do this, or you can simply console.log out the error message. If instead of writing this long line, you, you can, because um, Node doesn't have the document object. It doesn't have it. It doesn't have the document global object. It doesn't have it. So you have um, something different, but you don't have this document on Node.js. So This exists mainly in the browser. When you're running JavaScript, then you can actually do this. But when you're using Node.js from like back end, then you rather console or log this, or you might send the error name and the error message as a response to maybe um, to a request. So if a request comes from front end, you can send the response back. If there is an error, you can actually write it here. So then let's look at type error. So type error creates an instance of an error that occurs when a variable or parameter is not a valid type, or is not of a valid type. So maybe uh, so let's see. We are trying to change. So and this is an example of the type error. So let's say you're trying to make num, which is num is equals to 1. It's like saying you're trying to convert num to uppercase, but that's not possible because num is not actually a letter now. It's a number. You can't convert numbers to uppercase or to lowercase, or um, some other. You can't use some other functions, some other numeric or string functions on numbers. So this will generate an error saying you cannot convert a number to uppercase. So then we should look at URI error. So URI error. So this creates an instance representing an error that occurs when you use this URI, you encode URI or decode URI functions, and then you pass invalid parameters to them. So here's an example. So you can't decode you can't decode percentage signs, percentage symbols like this, especially when they are consecutive, like percent, percent, percent. You can't decode this. So since you can't decode this, this will create an error, and then an exception is raised for that particular error, and then it is being passed here. So you can actually um, decide on what you're going to use that message to do, the exception message, and then the name of the error. You can decide on what you're going to do with it. So let's continue. So we have all this. So we have aggregate error and we have internal error. This is a mistake. So this is internal error, not internal error. So let's look at aggregate error. So aggregate error, this creates an instance representing several errors wrapped in a single error when multiple errors need to be reported by the operation. So this works with using promises. When you say promise.any. So when you're using something like this, so example, using something like this, and then you have several errors wrapped in a single error. And okay, so when you have a lot of errors wrapped in a single error, and then when multiple errors need to be reported by an operation, so that will generate an aggregate error. So this aggregate error means like there is not just maybe one error that you have. Maybe you have a series of errors in that code, and then that is going to generate the aggregate um, error exception. So this internal error creates an instance representing an error that occurs when an internal error in the JavaScript engine is thrown. So for example, um if you try to run a recursion that is infinite, that it keeps on running and it never ends. So that is going to throw an internal error to tell you that maybe you have too much recursion in your code. And uh, so that's an example of how internal errors can be thrown. So let's try each of these codes and see how they work. So we talk about range error. So we are trying to get this to precision. So let me do this. Okay. So exception handling, create that. Okay. So let num equals to 1. Then try to num dot to, or let num equal to 1. Num to, so which particular one are we running now? Okay, we want to try range error. Uh, e then yeah. So we try to do that, and then we see that we have range error and then we have to precision. If we did e dot name, we are going to get range error as the result. If we did e dot message, so we are going to see the message for that particular error. So, or for that particular exception. So, the precision argument must be between 1 and 100. So you can have to precision that's higher than 100. Like the value here, it can be higher than 100 and it can be less than 1. So, so this works out. But if we did a precision, let's say to 20, okay, and then um, console.log, okay, so that is still going to give us none. So let's precise, let let precise num equals to that. Okay. So, but if we try that, maybe 200, it's going to run this error. So this is one of the ways you can actually generate range errors. So another thing you can also do is you can also you can do something different here. You can say maybe you can decide to write what you want to write. Maybe uh, an error occurred. Yeah, so that will also be printed out. Then let's look at reference error. So we said reference error object is generated when an error or when a variable that doesn't exist or hasn't been initialized in the current scope is referenced. Then we talked about x is equals to this. So let me just do that real quick. So said let x equals to um y plus 20, and then let's just console.log e. So we see that this results in a reference error. So you see reference error, y is not defined. Of course, reference error is the name of the error, while y is not defined is the message for that particular error. Then you actually saw this part where we didn't print out. So this is this is called the stack trace. So this shows you where the error is actually coming from. So this is the part to where the error is coming from, line 4. Then that line 4, if you move 3 steps from here, is it 1, 2, 3? I think this is going. So this white space are usually removed by the compiler. So if we did something like this, so x then equals to, then y is the next one. So y is the third thing you're going to meet when once you remove those spaces. Okay, so it's even okay, it's changing it to 1 now. So but the basic thing is just to know that this stack trace tells you the line where that error is coming from. So it shows you that this is line 4, and since uh, it's numbered here, you can actually trace it easily. So that's one advantage of using a code editor. So, or even if it's an online code editor or an offline code editor, that's one usefulness of having a code editor. So you can actually have number your line numbers, your lines being numbered, so you can trace error. So we've looked at reference error. So then let's look at syntax error. So this is an example of syntax error. So let me just copy this and see if I'll be able to paste it. Okay. So yeah, I know why this is screaming. So we see that we have syntax error. So invalid or unexpected token. I'm guessing even if I put that there, would that okay? Shows hello. But if I remove that quotation mark now, we have a syntax error. And I guess if I remove this too, we'll still have a syntax. Okay, we now have a reference error because hello is not defined anywhere here. So that's one. I guess if I remove that too, let's see. Okay, so that generates a different kind of error for us. So this is one way to generate this error. So that's and how to generate a syntax error. So before we move to the next thing, okay, we have one other one. So we have type error, and we talked about type error that uh, creates an instance representing an error that occurs when the parameter is not a valid type. So okay, so this parameter is not a valid type, and then it generates that error. So let me just run this quickly. So this stuff, instead of always writing console.log, I think we can just write function l arg. So I hope you guys understand what I just did. So that's type error. I just, instead of me writing console.log, 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 I just simply use create a function and pass what I want to pass to to be logged out, and then I just use the function wherever I want to use it. So let's continue. So this one generates URI error. So let me do that, and I just say L, it's the error. So doing that, uh, what did I miss out on? 6. So we have URI error, URI malformed. So this is generated because you cannot actually decode this URI. So you guys need to read about URI encode and URI decode, and some other functions we've uh, tried to use today. So of course, I'm going to drop these slides and some other ones I did, so you can actually go through them, um, pick some of these things and read about them. So then I remember I didn't do any example for these two. So let me. So I hope you guys understand all that, right? So if you're following, just come and write it on the comment section. If you have question, also ask here on the comment section. So I don't know if you're following, just type I'm following. So I'll be sure you guys are actually following. So I'll come back and check. So let's look at how to throw an exception. So I already said so exceptions are raised when an error occurs. So exceptions are just like a reaction to errors. So just take for example, if an accident happens now, so people gather, right? Or someone shouts and people gathers, right? So take the accident as being like an error, and then the reaction that maybe someone shouts or people gather are like the exceptions that are raised through that error. So you can actually try an exception. So JavaScript allows the developers to trigger exceptions via the throw statement. So you can actually create a new, you can throw any kind of error. Like for example, here we are throwing a range error here. So you can create, so this is like saying instead of allowing the the JavaScript interpreter to decide on the type of error, the error name, and the error message. You want to actually create the error, and then like the exception for that error, and then you pass in a message for that particular error. So here we are creating a range error, and then we are passing a message for that range error. So if you run this code, and of course it's true that the denominator is equals to 0. So if you do that, you say and you write this, you're going to see that the message is going to be attempted division by 0, and then the name of the error is actually going to be range error. So okay, so that's how you can try an error. Let me just do it real quick here. So let's say number. So let's number equals to 20. So we can say if number is if number is equal to 20, then we want to try new, we should want to throw a new maybe range error and put in whatever I want to put in there. So maybe this is a range error. So if we run that, uh, what's happening? Okay. So if we throw that, we see range error. This is a range error. Of course, if we did yeah. So we see that range error is the name of the error, and then this is the message for that particular error, that this is a range error, which is whatever we pass here. So whatever I pass in here is going to be the message. So this might not just be a range error. I think if you try type error here, so this is like you deciding what kind of error you want to throw and what message you want to give for that particular error. So, but if you don't do that, and there's and there's a syntax, like there's a mistake on your syntax or something, so it's going to decide on the kind of error it's going to throw. So why is this important? Why let's just talk about why it's important to handle exceptions, to check errors, and then when an exception is raised, you can actually handle that exception. So you don't really expect that every user that uses your, let's say your API, for example, might input correct the correct inputs. You get, sometimes they might input the, like they might be a wrong input, or um yeah, it's usually wrong input, or sometimes even you writing the API or writing your code, you might make a mistake on your code, and then you want it to be that, okay, if this mistake happens, or if the users input something that is not correct, then a message should be raised, and maybe that message should explain better what kind of error is happening and all those stuff. So you can use either throw or try and catch to actually handle those errors, and then you can actually decide on what kind of error you want to uh, use, like what how do I put it, you can decide how you want your error message to show, what type of error you want to show to the your users, or what kind of error you want to console the log out and the message for that error. So this is what we did here. So we decided that this should, so if this happens, if this number is equal to 20, then we want it to be a type error. So this is just like an example. So we want this to be a type error, and then we want this range error to output this is a range error. So with that said, so I hope okay, okay, okay. AJ Abiola, oh, you came late. Okay, so I this slide is going to be available to you guys very soon. It's still the same link for the slide, so you just click that link, and then you see it, like after the class is going to be available. So Ghostmas, you said it's hard to type a question though. So just summarize the question now. You might not really need to type the whole detail. Just hit the nail on the head, like the point you actually want to raise and ask your question. So I guess if you do that, it won't be that hard to type. So let's continue. We've seen how we can throw an exception by using the new throw new keyword, and then we create a new uh, type of uh, error we want to throw, and then we throw that the error finally. Then let's look at try and catch. So another method to catch an exception is to wrap a block of code that can potentially throw an error in a try statement. If the error has, if the code has no error, it will be, if the code has an error, sorry, it will be caught in the catch block. And the catch block wraps the JavaScript code that handles the error. Of course, I guess we already saw how try and catch plays out. We have this example for try and catch. We have variable 100, we have variable 0, and we are, we are, we are trying to divide, like we are saying 100 should be the numerator, 0 should be the denominator. And then we are saying if b as being the denominator is 0, then we should try an error, divide by 0 error. Else, if this is not equals to 0, if the denominator, which is b, is not equals to 0, then just divide it and store the answer as c. And you can also console.log c here. Then you can, so this error, now have you seen something inside this try? We throw an error. So when we throw this error, we can catch that error here. Uh, if so, apart from throwing the error here, if there was an error that happened because of your syntax that was inside this try block, that error would automatically be thrown, and then this catch statement can catch the error, and then you can now like show the error to the user or do whatever I want to do with that error. So just you guys should just look at the code. Like, I hope it's clear. So before we go to the finally block, we understand this part. This shouldn't be really hard to understand. So you throw here, you catch. So it's just like saying any error here. So if error does, if there's no error that occurs in this particular try block, it's going to run the code for this try block, and it's not going, since there's no error to catch, it's not going to run this part, this catch part. It's just going to try, and then when it try and there's no error, it's just going to continue the code, continue running whatever. If there's any other code down here, to just continue running it. It won't do the catch part. So then so let's look at the finally block. So we have the we have try, we have catch, which has yes, like the error, and then we now have finally. So let's look. So finally block, the finally code block is executed after the try and catch clauses, regardless of any exception. So the way finally works is whether there is an exception here in this try statement or there is no exception, the finally block of code will always run as far as that program is being run. So let's look at how that works. So we say, so this is how the code structure is. So you try to run something, if you run it and then there's an error, the error will be catchy, and then you can decide what you want to do with that error. If there's no error in this code block here, then the catch will not run. But whether there's an error in this code block or there's no error in this code block, the finally will always run. So this is an example of using a finally statement. So one reason to use the finally statement is, let's say you're writing WebSocket, for example. So WebSocket is a technology you use to preserve connections between, let's say, an API and the front end, or maybe two APIs, or any service that's actually going to use, let's say, WebSocket. So you can say that the WebSocket should open its connection here, then it should try a block of code, and then if the block of code works or not, it should close. Maybe after everything is like everything being done here, after everything runs from this point to this point, like you try and catch, the finally can now maybe disconnect the WebSockets from whatever service it was connected to before this code runs. So you can definitely do that using the finally statement. So let's see. So I'm going to also, let me just see. I think I can copy this example since it's long. I know here is supposed to be VAR. So let's see how that plays out. Okay. So let's look at this code now. It's going to actually raise an error saying that uh, divide by 0. So guys, just give me a minute. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm back. Okay. So I was saying, if we run this, it's going to actually create this true. So now notice something. Since we are using this inside a catch and try statement, and we are finally here, we are not using the new keyword. Why? Because when we throw this error will be caught by this catch block. So we are going to see how that works now. So let's do that. So do you see? So divide by 0 error is what we have here. So we are saying error, which is what you're seeing here, and we now concatenate the error that is being caught here. Then we see that after that, the finally block is being run. So we see the code has ran till the end. So this just console logging that the code has ran till the end. And then if, for example, maybe we said this should be like 10, we run it, we're going to see 10, right? Um so if we divide these two, the result of C is going to be 10. Of course, maybe if I change this to 2, so we will see 50 there. And then after 50, we are going to still see that the code has run till the end. So we see that the finally runs like where, like, what's, no matter the condition, whether there's a catch, there's an error or not. So it finally runs. So that wraps it up for this class. So I hope you've learned about something. So let's just go over what we've done. For people that came late, we talked about errors and exceptions, talked about types of errors, and we talked about how to throw an exception, how to use try and catch block, and then how to use the finally. So then we talked about error and exception. So a JavaScript code throws an exception when a particular statement generates an error. So when an error is generated, what is thrown for that error? Maybe to describe that error is an exception. So when an error occurs in JavaScript, it creates an error object with two properties, which is the name and the message. So for these errors, like for example, this one, if we did error.name, uh, that will give you range error as the error name. Then if you do error.message, it will tell you, it will describe the kind of error, like this to precision now that is 500, to tell you that maybe to precision can be within the range of 1 to 100, like how we saw. Then we have reference error, we have syntax error, we have type error, and then all of them come with their examples. So if you came late, you can actually um, look at these errors and their examples and learn one or two things from it. Maybe how to use it, how to apply it, how to raise those errors. So then we talked about how to try an exception. So you can create a new exception and throw it. And then since we are not catching it anywhere, so we are throwing it here and we are already giving it, like we are creating a new error here and we are throwing that error directly. So if this is true, then this error would actually be thrown out. So this is going to be like the name of that error, and then whatever you pass in here is going to be the message for that particular error. Then okay, so it's still the same thing. Then we talked about try and catch. So try and catch, we've seen how try and catch works just a few minutes ago. So we said another method to catch an exception is to wrap a block of code that can potentially throw an error in the try statement. If the code has an error, it will be caught in the catch block. So the catch block wraps the JavaScript code that handles the error. So of course, this is self-explanatory now. If you've written a code and you're sure that this code can actually catch an error, then you are going to use write the catch block. So this catch block is going to catch the error anytime that error is generated. And then there is an example of try and catch, and then we can now talk about the finally. So finally is executed whether an error is generated or not. So I hope that makes sense. So try, catch, and finally code structure. So you see, you write your try code inside here, the code you want to try. If there's an error, you write your catch here with the error passed in here. Then your finally block runs whether there is an error or not. So then this is an example of try, catch, and finally. So with this, we've come to the end of the class today. So thank you. Thank you very much for attending today's class. If you have any question, okay, meaning you can use throw to describe your error. Meaning we can use throw to describe our error is to display aside the default error, or is throw an alternative to catch. So throw, let me, okay, is throw an alternative to catch, meaning we can use throw to describe our error. it's to display aside the default error. So let's look at this example. Yeah, so you can pass a message. Okay, so here, if you're using a try and catch and you want to actually throw a particular kind of error, you can use this throw method and then you pass a message. So now this particular throw error, this particular throw, let me make this go like, let me make it like this. So this throw now that I've written is going to pass this argument here into the catch, and then you can just simply like console.log e out. So this e here is the value of what you wrote in here as your throw, as the argument for your throw function. So whatever you write here is what is going to be passed here. So you write this inside a try and catch, right? So when you throw that error, you describe what's like, this is like saying the message for that error, but this particular throw now doesn't have a name. So this error we're writing here just serves as like a name for the error, and then this e, which is what you passed in here, is like what you're using to describe the error. So this is like saying you want to throw your own kind of error. So like an error you feel you're trying to check on your own. So we are checking if b is equals to 0, and it's true that b is equals to 0. So we throw an error with a message in it, and then when we throw that error, this is going to catch that error, and then whatever you call this, whether error or error or even anything you call it, this value here is going to have whatever you passed into throw as argument, and then you can decide what you want to do in here with that error. So Code Smiles, Alpha, are you clear now? No. And another thing, throw is not an alternative to catch. So you can't use throw and leave catch, because when you throw an error and you're not using the new error, like that new error syntax, so you're not creating an error, you're just throwing the error like that, like how we saw here. So when you're throwing this error, you need to catch it somewhere. If I throw something now, if I throw phone now and person no dey to catch am, so the phone go fall for ground. So it's the same thing here. If you're throwing an error like in this form, and then there is nothing to catch that error, then how do you trap that error? How do you show that error to the user, or try like use what you've thrown, like the error you've thrown? So when you're using the throw keyword, that's throw new, then maybe range error or type error, that's when you might not really need to write this catch statement, because that is like saying you're throwing a new error that you have generated, like you create a new kind of like, you're the one creating the error. So you're, where is that place that we wrote new error, throw new error? Let me see if I'll be able to see that place. uh yeah, so you're here, we see that since we are creating a new kind of error, we are throwing in a new error, like with, of course, you know what the new keyword is now. Range error is like, is a class for errors, and then you're creating, sorry, yeah, you're creating a new kind of range error. So this is, I hope like you're getting this thing. You're creating a new type of error, and then since you're creating that new type of error, if this is true, that error is created and is being automatically sent back to the user. So here, since you're using new and you're creating that error here, and then you're passing the message. This is going to be sent to the user without actually catching it somewhere. But here we are using true. We are not using the new keyword. We are not specifying what kind of error it is. So if you're doing this, you need to catch that error you've thrown somewhere, and that's going to have you. That means you have to have this catch statement. Okay, so you've got it. But when yeah, so that's how the two work. So in here, where we used that's new, it's not only range errors you can create though. You can create type errors, you can create syntax error. So this is you saying I'm creating this error and that's what I want to throw. When once this is true, I want to create that error and throw it. But here you're saying if this happens, then I want to throw this error, but this error I'm throwing is not a kind of like error that already exists. Like it's not part of any error class or error object. It's not part of any error object, but you want to throw this particular error that you have written, and then since you're throwing it without it being an object of like any error object, since you're throwing it this way, you need to catch it somewhere, and then when you catch it somewhere, you can actually use it for whatever you want to do. So Coach Miles, are you clear now? Because okay, let me show you. If we removed this, let me delete, okay, let me leave this part, or let me just make it that way. So we are throwing error, but we are not catching it anywhere, Abi. Let me change this back to 0. Of course, what you're going to see is it's your error. What you're throwing will generate another kind of error. You're seeing here that it cannot read property of undefined rights. Is it rights? Abi writer e. So you're not catching this error you've thrown anywhere. There's nowhere you're catching this error. So this error is just thrown and it falls to the ground and breaks. Nothing is catching it, right? But if this was maybe 2, and that code will run. But since you're not catching this error anyway, and this is not an, but if we did something like new syntax error, and we try this, then this is going to generate syntax error, because syntax error is a kind of error object, and then this is going to be passed as like the message for that syntax error. But without this new, if you remove it and you just write true, to generate another error for you. Okay. All right. So if is there any other question? So if you can ask your question here, maybe during when you go through the slides at your spare time, and you probably have any other question you want to ask, you can always ask it on the Slack channel, and I would come and check for it. So most times I'm usually active, let's say in the night or in the evenings. So by that time, I'll check it. If I'm also available in the afternoon, I'll check it. I'll check it. So, but I'm encouraging you to like always ask questions. Try out stuff. Go through the slides. If you get confused or you tried something and it doesn't work, just come and ask your question. So with that said, we move. We move, right? So Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for attending today's class. So we are going to see on Wednesday. All right. So have a nice day. Oh, oh, okay. So you're asking when is stage 4 task. All right. So I am going to drop that stage 4 task before the end of today. So just stay tuned. You're going to see your tasks and you'll be able to do it and submit. And I don't know, maybe say wahala. I don't think the deadline would be today now. So you do your stage 4 task and then you submit it. So the deadline and every other thing will be communicated to you on the Slack channel. All right. So I hope there's no other issue now. There's no other thing. So I hope Code Smiles, you're okay. Chimsom, Ajibola, um, Ibokun, Alpha, you guys are okay, right? No question, right? Okay, okay, cool. So thank you very much for attending today's class, and see you on Wednesday. Bye bye.